I'm interested in this movie because it's so fascinating. I think it's a perfect vehicle though for you because it shows off your comedy so well. Was there something about Walter, the script itself, that really drew you to be a part of this film?
Oh yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, I love uh, stories about broken real humans, right? And the first time that I read the script, I had a visceral emotional reaction to what was happening to Walt. I sometimes it's just one of those things. You're like, hey, I understand. Like, I don't know why exactly I understand. My situation isn't necessarily like this, but I understand. And then I read it again really quickly afterwards, and it was still there. And I wrote my people almost immediately, being like, let's set up a Zoom ASAP. I don't want this to go another way. I feel so strongly about this film and already have a crazy amount of ideas of what I can bring to the table for it. I want it, right? And so, we did. We Zoomed really quickly, and our 15-minute allotted Zoom turned into a 90-minute allotted Zoom. And by the end, Matt and Jen will say the same thing. It felt like we were just talking to old friends, and we were on the same page. And it was like, all right, let's do this thing.
Well, Walt's in this relationship. He's just moved to this place and he's got a fur baby, as
Yeah.
most people tend to refer to their pets as like their children. And
Mm-hmm.
Wendy may be a little overly attached, but also it's just a beautiful relationship that she has with with this animal. Walt, not so much. This is something that's getting in the way of his relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious how you and Max and Jen talked about where Tony plays such a significant role to Wendy and Walt.
Yeah. Well, I think ultimately, Tony is just sort of like the caveat for Walt, right? Like it's about him being able to get out of his own way. It's about him finding the opportunity to finally feel comfortable in his own skin. And, unfortunately, there's a really cute pup here who can't speak or answer for himself, that Walt just takes all of it out, his indifference, his jealousy out on him, because he doesn't want to point the finger back at himself, and he definitely doesn't want to look in the mirror. And it takes an unfortunate incident like losing this pup that gives Walt the opportunity to find himself a little bit more, find his footing in Portland, and realize that, in fact, all of these roadblocks that he imagines are in his way are just self fabricated, right? And by the end of it, we see that, the dog understands Walt more than Walt thinks that he does, or that anybody does. And I got to say, while we were filming it, Mr. Tibbs and I grew incredibly close together. That was like the hardest thing for me to do, was to pretend that I did not like this incredibly cute pup. And like, so much so in that final scene, when I walk down the steps and I'm, saying that I'm going to go sleep on the couch, um, his trainer is supposed to be there with a squeaky toy, and she didn't hear me coming down the steps. That was him just following me naturally by himself. And I just think that's a testament to sort of like the atmosphere that we created on
Right.
set, and the bond that Mr. Tibbs and I were able to create throughout
Clearly.
the filming. Yeah.
And speaking of bonds, I love the one that Walt develops with Marianne. I think it's such a great relationship. Um, and she sums up, I think, the entire film in one line where she says, "Oh, you're like, oh, you think that's too low of a reward?" And she said, "Well, how much is your relationship worth to you?" Talk about that relationship too, since it does play a significant role in the film.
Yeah, well, I mean, we see Wendy's parents, but we don't necessarily get a glimpse of Walt's. And I think it's safe to say that they're out of the picture for various of reasons, whether that's Walt keeping them away or they're naturally just sort of away. But I think she really comes in as a parental figure and guidance for him, something that he clearly wants, is looking for, and needs, even though he won't admit it to himself. And I think, after a few attempts of her, like, just trying to knock on that door, she finally busts through and does what Walt needs her to do: grab him, not physically, but, metaphorically, and bring him up there and sit him down and actually talk to him and engage with him. And, without even knowing it, she's like encouraging him to become an artist, right? Which I think is something that he really needs really badly. He needs that sort of personal confidence builder and affirmation from somebody else because he
A
can't find it.
parental figure in that way too.
Right. Oh, without a doubt. Like I think we see that by the time we get to the end of the film, and she hands him the piece of paper, and she's like, say this 4 times. And he's like, no, 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 I don't want to do that. Right. Like, parents understand that sometimes it isn't that the teachable moment isn't teaching them the moment, it's allowing them to be taught the moment by themselves. Right. And at that point, she had given him such opportunity for him to discover it for himself, and yet he still wasn't able to kind of get there. And then just by handing it to him and saying, read these 4 words, let them sink in, let them feel them, he's getting, what inevitably is the parent's role: to kind of allow them this footing, this grounding, to fail and still be seen and still be sort of supported, and to allow them to become the most vulnerable that they can be.
Well, there's so
And
many
it's aesthetic.
poignant, yes, there's so many poignant scenes to this film.
You know?
And you're just so good in this. Is there
Thank
a
you.
particular moment in the movie where you're most proud of the work that you've put into it?
Oh, I mean, gosh, there's so many. I mean, there's things, like the great thing about doing low budget indies, and with something that's written so incredibly well, and under the lens that Matt wanted to put it through. Because one of the things about Matt that's great is he'll let a moment sit. He'll let you sit in an uncomfortable moment, and then it somehow becomes funny, and then he'll let it sit some more, and he won't yell cut, and we're still going, and it becomes even funnier. So we find these beautiful moments of humor that are coming out of moments of dread or exasperation that allow Walt and the audience to sort of exhale together, right? So I'm thankful for those opportunities. But I think the thing, there's a bunch. Like the when I lose Tony, I think that there was something in the air happening that night. It was the warmest it had been in Portland through our entire shoot, and we didn't have the budget to close off roads. So it was me and the brilliant DP Nathan Golan, just kind of, he was on handheld. I told him, I was like, look, we almost got hit by a truck, and I had to physically move so that he could follow me. But there was something incredibly beautiful and visceral, like a tango, happening between us right then, and allowing me to sort of like melt down and go into this wild craze in front of just regular Portlanders who just happened to be in the midst of what was happening, right? So that was particularly brilliant and something that I'm proud of, just the way that we were able to tango together. Um, the real tender moments between Walt and Brent, after Buffy sticks the cigarette up my nose, and we have like a bro down moment where he becomes very vulnerable in front of me, talking about what happened with his wife, and we start seeing similarities between the two of them. And then we have our sort of musical interlude. I think is probably one of the most like emotionally collected moments I've ever had. Um, and then one thing that I'm just like super proud of, because like I'm a huge old school like Buster Keaton, sort of guy, is when I'm talking on the phone with her the second time and she wants to speak to him and he's not there. So I just kind of like hold it out in sort of a way to where the dog was. Like, that tickled me, but being able to add that sort of level of physicality into Walt and musicality, like physically within him, was something that I was like really, really interested in exploring. And I'm glad I got the opportunity to do that.
I mean, you do have this gift for comedy. Did Matt let you improv a little bit here or there, especially when it came to speaking to Tony?
Yeah, I mean, in general, like I'm old school, like old school Chicago theater person. So, like, we want to tell the story to the best of our ability. And what that means for me is I do everything on the page first, right? But I've got 1,000 ideas that I'm thinking about. I've got alts for Walt for days, right? And so once we would get what was on the page, I'd come up to Matt and be like, hey, I've got an idea for this. Let's just roll, or let's just do a series on this. And then we would just sort of get alts and everyone would kind of go in different directions. I mean, when you have people as gifted as Kelly and Steve and Barbara and Catherine to like work with and to push you and to infect you as much as they do, and they're like so amazing at just like rolling with anything that comes along, that it was just like, yeah, let's find these happy moments, these sort of happy accidents. I mean, that song that we sang, Brent and I, is a song that Steve made when he was heartbroken when he was 20, about a woman. And he was like, do you mind if I just throw this in? And I was like, no, man, let's go. And we just started doing it, and that became the crux of that, and it was like his own vulnerable relationship experience added so much, to the film. And Matt and Jen were loving it from the get-go. They were totally down for it.
This is a standout movie for you, and you're getting such wonderful praise for the work you've put in and accolades as well for this movie. What do you hope lingers with audiences that watch it? Is it to get out of your comfort zone? Is it to open your heart a little bit more? Is it all of the above? Do you have a particular emotion or message you hope lingers with people?
I hadn't really thought about that, but those sound good. What you just said. No, I think in general, we've, as a society, fallen into this place where we talk to each other and not with each other anymore. And I think a lot of that stems from us being in our own sort of bubble. And if anything, Walt is a perfect depiction of what it's like to live inside of a self contained bubble where we don't feel comfortable and we don't necessarily want to step out of it for fear of what might be there. And I think this is a perfect opportunity for people to maybe get in touch with themselves, start to put themselves in positions where they can feel a little bit more comfortable in their skin and open up to other people around them, right? Instead of talking at each other, let's talk with each other. Let's build a stronger community. And hopefully, in that, you'll build a bit stronger self, right? And I think we all can sort of use that at this point as we walk around just glued to our phones or our earbuds or whatever it is and continue to shut the world out. I think this film really highlights the opportunities of what it would be like if we start letting the world in a little bit more.
Oh my goodness, well said.
Thank you.